I'm Amanda Fields, and welcome to Mixing Forms, Mixing Media, Trends in Prose. The Connecticut Literary Festival is produced and curated by the English Department at Central Connecticut State University with support from CT Humanities. Special thanks to Real Artways, RJ Julia Bookstore, and all of our corporate and individual sponsors. We couldn't do any of this without their financial assistance, so please consider supporting the festival. After today's literary carnival, the festival will continue to promote the literary arts through their reading series, promoting the Connecticut Book Award finalists and the Connecticut Anthology, and their virtual Lit Talk series. Please check the website for future programming. After the panel, please continue the conversation outside in the signing tent with the panelists. Now I'm pleased to introduce the moderator for our panel. Mary Collins is the author of 4 adult nonfiction books, 5 young adult nonfiction books, and many essays. For a look at her first experiment with blending media and narrative nonfiction, check out her project on how to improve public discourse, www.thebronzedproject.com. A professor of creative writing and nonfiction at Central Connecticut State University, Mary also teaches nonfiction in the Yale Summer Writing Program.
Thank you, Amanda. So welcome. I know it by the end of this amazing festival that everyone's a little tired, so we're going to try to bring the energy. We are getting film, which is great, because then you could play the discussion later for people who couldn't be here today. So we're taking a look at some very exciting trends in prose, and we have 2 authors here. Our 3rd author couldn't come. I want to give you a quick snapshot of who's up here. We've got Lilly, the author of Negative Space, about to come out, forthcoming memoir, came out in May. Fantastic. Okay, I got the pre-gals. A reported and illustrated memoir winner of the Santa Fe Writers Project Literary Awards. Lilly is the editor of Burn It Down, an anthology of essays on women's anger. Her writing has been published by Long Reads, The Washington Post, Glamour, Playboy, Rolling Stone, and elsewhere. Anthony, welcome. Yeah, we're gonna get plenty of love. We're gonna get plenty of love too. All right, then we got Anthony, a creative director, consultant, motivational speaker, director, producer of Shay, a 16-minute drama on Amazon Prime, and the founder of Cultural Mag, a social emotional learning tool created for classroom use. Anthony's recent project, On the Car Ride Home, shares with readers and listeners thoughts processed by an EMT during the midst of a pandemic. So each time one of us picks up a book, we think we're going to get to the end, right? And the writer, if they're good enough, they keep and hold our interest, but increasingly the reader wants more than just pure text. So I love that we have some authors here experimenting with some incredibly fun things. And given the trends in reading, we better be experimenting. I was doing a little research before we got here, because of course this is a festival of writers, people who love books. So we are all together thinking everyone's reading books, but 25% of Americans don't read a single thing in a year. And the overall drop in leisure reading has been 40% since 2004. So I have a great deep interest in what's going on in my panel and my topic, because pretty much the long-form reader is over 55, and if we're going to bring in a new type of reader, we're going to have to care more about what it is that reaches them and how do we change our stories. So this in mind, I'm incredibly excited that we have these 2 authors here today. They're doing some very, really refreshing stuff. And even though Anthony is sitting right here, I am not going to start with him. I just can't resist doing this. He includes QR codes in his work. And what's so interesting about them is that it's not him reading his work, it's supplementing the work. So I'm actually going to open, even though he's here, I'm going to open with his QR code for just 5 seconds to show you how he is adding these throughout the book. I forgot to turn my volume on because let's see if I can get it to go here. Got a little music happening. So I have to do that because they're throughout the book. You're reading the text, and there's a QR code. You can choose to engage in the QR code, which isn't the reading of the text, or you can be reading the text or looking at the art. I absolutely love that and think that that's just the sort of exciting things that need to be happening. So can you talk a bit about how you arrived at this approach?
Well, first this is microphone.
It's definitely working, Anthony.
Can we turn it down and levels down, please?
Thank you.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Sounds better? Well, first, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for everybody for attending this panel. Thank you for the introductions. It's an honor to sit up here with some amazing authors. I had some conversation with Lilly earlier. It was great. And I'm excited to be on this panel and get to know more about Marion. Marion, you all can know more about me. And so to answer your question, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
How did you end up with this approach of this mixed media, bringing the QR codes in? They're not just podcasts, it's integral to the project, the blend of it, and I wanted to know, how did you enter into using this mixed media?
So great question. For me, it was just understanding what I know I'm good at. I wrote scripts, I like music, but I didn't really consider myself a full-on author, because there are people who have taken writing classes, who've taken workshops, and have devoted their lives to writing and telling stories. And so I did what I knew. I knew music, and during the pandemic, Bob Ross, we all know Bob Ross, right? Happy mistakes. Somehow my mistakes end up really being happy, because I do what I can and it ends up becoming some sort of masterpiece. And so during the pandemic, I wanted to give back in some way. Being a motivational speaker, speaking at high schools, speaking at colleges, speaking in middle schools, I noticed that there are a lot of people who didn't have a source for motivation. They needed this motivation. I would go home after a 12-hour EMT shift in Hartford in the midst of the pandemic and sit in my driveway, and moments of reflection were literally in my car or in my driveway. It was never inside the house. And I find that most people, they're reflecting on the car ride home. And so I said, I know what I can do, which is talk. So I'll talk over some music to make it something that you can listen to on the car ride. But then I realized that there are people who might just want to read instead of just listen. So I said, let me take the lyrics and put that into book form. I did it in a poetic way because, again, I'm not an author in the regard of writing like nonfiction or fantasy or any type of novel. So I felt poetry was a more simplified way of conveying what I wanted to convey without the perfect linguistic, if that makes sense. So I did it in a poetry format, but I wanted to combine the two worlds. I wanted to combine the world of music and, just the audio, but I also wanted to, immerse it with the writing. And so that's when I said, all right, QR codes. So instead of you having to go buy this audiobook independently from this actual book, why not have the book and then you can go stream whatever you want on Spotify, Apple Music, and you can listen while reading, or you can just listen to it if you want. So just kind of just an inspiration of like, how can we immerse ourselves in multimedia?
Well, what I thought was interesting, Anthony, when I was reading the book, and it's hard, we weren't allowed to have a screen in here, so here we have a visual image, but you'll have text, lines, QR codes, images. Tell me a little more about how did you do the text first and then the QR codes later? How were you blending, or was it a simultaneous art project for you that the only way you could approach it was not first text and then audio, but all of it was one for you? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, another great question. I see why you moderate. So for me, I sat on the couch and I committed myself to doing this project. I don't like having ideas sometimes because I'm one of those people, once I have this idea, I'm doing it. Like, I'm going all in, and I don't want to go to work anymore. I'm like, I spend 12 hours doing this, like I'm late to work. So it started out as an album, because that's what I really wanted to do. I'm no singer, but I wanted to be able to put motivation in music in some manner, in some shape, in some form. And from there, it then turned into taking those lyrics that I had wrote on that couch and turning it into book format. So I designed the book as well. Everything I do,
images, there's a photo in here, just really, really interesting blend. So how do you decide what's the text on the page and what's the lyric?
All right, so
I didn't know I was going to ask you that question, but I'm asking it now because I am curious.
I don't know, it just
Really?
what felt right.
Yeah.
Because when you read it, when you listen to it, it's emotion, there's storytelling, like specifically it's a journey on the car ride home. So the first track or the first piece, I opened up the book with a preface, however you describe tomato, just explaining what this is, what this car ride will be, what this journey will be for us, for you. But then you get into like the first track, the first reading, and it's about audacity. It's about imposter syndrome. It's about walking into room or walking into spaces and not feeling like you belong. But then how do we overcome that? How do we take that next step and knowing that I do belong in this space? And that one word is audacity. Then because I answer that question aloud, it's like, who am I to even be an author? Who am I to ask to write this book? And then we move on, and it's a journey. And by the end of it, you end with building your legacy. Like you have your legacy. So it's really great. And then there are the journal prompts in there where you can because it's like a guide. I want it to be something that you can carry forever. Like you can grow with it, and it can grow with you.
But that, you just made a really great comment. How am I comfortable in this space, right? So a person could be asking that, right? And when you guest speak, you're asking that of the people who are listening to you, may not be feeling very comfortable sometimes in society. But that's also true for readers, right? How do you make them comfortable in this space, which is the page? So I do feel that there are so many other things happening on the page now that is making a wider range of readers feel more comfortable coming to the page. So with that, let's move to you, Lily, for a bit. Very exciting to talk about your new memoir, which is already out. I just opened up the author galleries. Negative Space. It's a real page-turner. Family trauma and challenges, drug addictions, parents, divorce, poverty, own struggles with addiction. But to be honest, after 30 years of doing this, I've read a lot of memoirs. So what made it pop for me is that she brings in her father's art. And you're going to see on your chair, again, we couldn't bring in a screen. I made copies of 2 pieces of art that are in Lily's book. And the relationship of her father to his art, her relationship to his art and to him. And I must note that she lost her father when she was 12 and had a very off-again, on-again situation of seeing him during those formative years. So actually, I first wanted to ask you if you could give us a little context about your father as an artist before we get to your work.
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. My father was a very prolific artist. He worked in all kinds of mediums, a lot of sculpture involving found materials, some carving, animal bones. He used a lot of lead, which he would melt in the soup pot in the kitchen, and my mother would scream at him. It turns out lead is very toxic. Human hair, all kinds of stuff, and he also made a lot of woodcuts. So I think of the 2 you have, there's a wood sculpture there and then an ink drawing. And his artwork was my way into the story. When I originally started writing the book, I didn't think it was a memoir. I wanted it to just be an art book, telling the story of my father's life and kind of using the evolving imagery that he worked in as a way to kind of shape that story and a way to try and understand him, thinking that I could decode the artwork in a way, looking at the deer, what that meant to him. And there was a long series of dog masks, and I thought maybe that would make me understand him. He did a series of small figurines of women called Bad Barbies. And those were, when I was a kid, so I remember those. But they're like, about Barbie size, but they're made out of lead and animal bones and human hair and knife blades and stuff. So they're not Barbie-ish.
So then we get to what we were talking about with Anthony about, you mentioned a bit, you started with his art, and then at some point this became, it is a traditional book in the sense there is a substantial amount of text. The art is so integral to it, though. So talk about your relationship with that art, and as you pull out your own prose, and how you were trying to blend the two on the page, just like Anthony blending all those forms.
Yeah, it was kind of a process of layering. And I started with the art, and the art was my way into my father's story. But then to get readers to feel invested and to care about it, I kept coming up against this question of, how am I going to make readers care about the life story of an artist who they've never heard of, who's been dead for 20 years? And I figured out along the way that the way I was going to get readers to care was through my investment in the story. So it became my story of searching for the story, and became kind of an investigative, I started to think of it almost as a detective novel, like following these clues to try to piece together a fuller story of my father. And every time somebody read it to give me feedback, they kept wanting more of my narrative. So eventually I layered in even more beyond just the search narrative. There's also, some of my story after my father's death, and being like a, delinquent in New York City and dropping out of school and getting into trouble, and eventually finding my way to grad school after that.
I told you, it's a page. It's just going, you're like, whoa, whoa. But then the art always comes back. And again, I'm going to have the black and white edition of just the
It's all
Pierce
black
copy.
and white.
So are we losing something when we displace text with art, displace text with QR code? I think that's fundamental to the discussion today and for this whole Lit Festival. I mean, again, I mentioned to someone today, I picked up a Wall Street Journal the other day, and the font is 3 times bigger than it ever used to be. In the New Yorker, it's 3 times bigger than it ever used to be. But then in my journalism and feature writing class, I handed these publications out, and they're like, the font is so small. And I was like, no, it used to be 3 times smaller than that. There used to be 3 times more text in these publications. So I really welcome either of you answering the question of what is won and lost in this battle over attention for the reader, giving up space for text, something else other than text. Tell me how you feel about that.
I think there are really 2 different conversations when you're talking about, there's the internet attention span, right? And writing for the internet, where you have analytics and you can see exactly how many seconds a reader spends on a page before they click off. And it makes writers and editors, I think, very apprehensive about laying any kind of groundwork. It's like you have to get to the story immediately, which has always been this case in journalism somewhat, right? You put the most important information up top, and as you get to the bottom, it's stuff that could be cut, literally, if it needed to be. But in a book, I think you have a little more space to spread out, right? If somebody's going to pick up a physical book, they're going to pay $16.95 for it. They're probably going to spend more than those 10 seconds giving it a chance. And in this case, I think the art only adds, or not even adds, but is essential to the heart of the project. So I don't think anything was lost by making that space on the page. I did have to make the story itself as succinct as possible so that the book didn't end up being this thick and scaring readers away. But I don't think that hurt it. Everything that was cut in the end was not essential. So I'm all for being
I think especially,
succinct.
Again, after reading the full book, that it was so distinct that you were responding to your father's art in a way to get to know him. I can't quite imagine the memoir without the art, but Anthony, could you? Yeah, please do.
One, I gotta get that's number 1. And number 2, I echo everything you just mentioned. And I look and I say, imagine a house without windows. Now imagine a house with 1 window. Now imagine a house with 2 or 3 windows. Now you can look out the bedroom window or the bathroom window. You get a different perspective, right? You get a full experience of what it feels like to live inside this house. And so with any type of multimedia art, such as Lily's and mine and whatever authors are out there, there's this opportunity to immerse yourself in this full experience. Whereas, you're able to create this world in your head where you can read text, but you can also add to that world by the additional components that this book is offering you through photos, through whatever imagery that is there, through audio, and through QR codes, and whatever that, or even through touch, through texture. When you feel the page, that too is something that we may not even pay much attention to, but that too creates that entire experience from the book cover, from how that looks, everything. And so I think that it served its purpose. It served its purpose.
It's interesting because I think in negative space, the art was so integral to understanding. I needed it. And here, I thought your prose your poems, text could stand alone or with it, and that you were just providing different access points, which is 2 different reasons for having this. So we were supposed to have a 3rd panelist. He's not here, so I'm going to bring up little bit of my own work in relation to a key question that I don't think I've seen discussed enough here at the festival, which is, I know as an author, every time I publish a book, the marketing department gets it last, right? And they're like, well, which shelf does it go on at the Barnes & Noble, and which category does it fit under on Amazon? And if your stuff doesn't fall neatly into these categories, they often will nix the book deal. That's almost happened to me twice. So in my sedentary culture book, they thought it was a book about health, but really it turned out to be a book about city planning. And then in my book with my son, At the Broken Places, and his coming out as a trans man, they were convinced it was a parenting book, and I'm like, this is so not a parenting book. Okay? And you have these battles. Now we have to overlay, well, it's also going to be a mixed media text. Tell me how you're dealing with finding markets for your work.
It's very difficult.
No, that's not what you want to hear at a lit festival.
I think that's been my biggest struggle with anything that I've created. I've had the opportunity to even create. Shay, which is the 16-minute teen drama that's on Amazon Prime. Like when I first, wrote the script, I was in bed after Achilles injury. I tore my Achilles tendon playing basketball and I had surgery. And when you spend 30 hours a day, right, 30 hours a day watching Netflix, I look into myself and I'm like, well, maybe I can try to make use of my time. Maybe I can try to write a script. But when it's all said and done, and after filming and after submitting to film festivals and getting rejected over and over and over again, knowing that you have a great product and a great story, you're looking like, what other option is there out there? And so what I found in my life, unfortunately, but it's also fortunate too, because it teaches me resilience, it teaches many people resilience. It's, the way you, sometimes you have to do it yourself is what I'm saying. And I published this myself. I have no book deal. Shay being on Amazon, it's difficult, but being in places like this, having opportunities to do this allows me and other authors and other creatives to connect with other individuals who hopefully can open that door with a house full of windows. You see what I did there?
The categorization was definitely a stumbling block in the process of getting this book out into the world. It was rejected by agents and publishers like almost 50 times before I eventually was one of the winners of this contest and got published that way. And I think that categorization was a big part of it. I got a lot of really glowing complimentary rejections. It said like, we love this so much, but we don't know how to sell it, which is like stock phrase that you'll probably hear a lot and probably have heard a lot if you've submitted a lot of work. But I wasn't going to give up that aspect. It's an art book memoir, is what I call it. But for marketing purposes, I started to think of it almost in like a Trojan horse sense of like, sure, yeah, it's a memoir.
Yeah, that's good.
Call it whatever you want. Sure, call it a memoir, put it on the memoir shelf, but then also, surprise, there's an art book inside of the memoir.
Yeah, at Beacon Press, they were like, the books of essays aren't selling right now, so the book you did with your son is not a collection of essays. And I was like, oh, but it is. And they're like, no. So that's not going to be on the cover.
No.
And it's a memoir. I'm like, but there's two of us. How do you do a memoir? Two people exchanging essays. I just kept my mouth shut. Marketing took over of that. So, yes, please, go ahead.
So I don't have a degree in marketing. My degree is actually in biology. I just like to create stuff, and I would rather pursue a career in media. But with having a background in marketing and just from having to design and create and sell my own stuff, the big thing is just understanding what the story is that you're selling. And once you understand that story, the ethos of that story, you build around that world. Again, you find different methods, different strategies. So one way in which I marketed this book was I created little like 3x3 cards, and on it said for motivational purposes only. And on the other side was a QR code. So the QR code then didn't take you to the book, but it took you to the album. So at least you were able to listen to it. What I would say to people was, for motivational purposes only. I'd even give them to patients. So when I'm on an ambulance and I'm bringing somebody to the hospital who really had a bad day, maybe going to the Institute of Living or whatever the case may be, I'm able to give them this card and I tell them, when you're done with it, give it to somebody else. So now we're, at least the message is getting out there. I'm more impact over income. And however I can provide some sort of impact, I'll do it. And so there are little seeds that I try to create from any project that I do that allows each project to have additional legs, an extension of it. So again, allow this house to have more than just 3 windows.
Oh, Anthony, making my day. You're so clever. This is amazing. I'm taking notes. But Lilly, go to so you have books now. What are you doing? How are you getting into the hands of readers? Because you've got this great blend of image and text, but how are you getting in the hands of readers?
I mean, I've done a ton of like Zoom readings, which are kind of miserable, but better than nothing. But the launch party was actually a gallery show. And luckily it was in June, in that little window where it felt okay to have a lot of people in a room together. And that was kind of always what I had envisioned for launching this book into the world, because the original impetus of it was sharing the artwork with people. So I wanted the launch event to be in a room surrounded by the art. And that was really special. I rented out a space in Brooklyn. It was about the size of this room, I guess, and installed the whole show myself. My father was a very do-it-yourself kind of guy, so I knew that's how I would have wanted it. And we got to bring people in to actually see the work in person, because reproductions will only give you so much. You know, they're printed pretty well, but it's not the same as seeing it in person, especially for the sculpture. You know, there were some pieces that it was important to be able to see them from multiple angles, so I put them on big shelves so you could get kind of not 360, but you know, three sides of it at least, and then read from the book in that space. So that was
that's so fantastic, though. Again, someone might have come for the art and then they walked away with the book.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, our third guest isn't here, so now you're going to become a guest, because I want to know, really, in the end, the changing trends in prose is about readers, and we are in a festival of avid readers. But even avid readers are changing their habits. So I'm interested from the audience, instead of asking questions right away, which we'll have time for that, I want to ask you one question. Is what keeps you in something that you pick up? Are you finding when you go to, let's say, a New York Times article, if it has a video clip that is a distraction, do you click on the links? Are you expecting that more from the books that you pick up that we're seeing in our daily media? I'm really curious to see how your reading habits are changing. Anybody?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Yeah, Scott. That's my husband, by the way, so he's a plant.
Not rehearsed, I promise you.
Yeah.
I am a lawyer, and for years I've had my own practice, and I have never taken a credit card for payment. And recently we had the idea that through a building company that we on our bills we put a QR code which gets people right to the credit card company and gives them like one-stop payment. And it is amazing how it changed my firm. And just by catering to the way that they run their lives, by waiting for pictures when they're thumbing through a book or whatever, it was just using something that you've used in your book has made a big difference in my practice. I mean, people are going to pay their bills, just a question of how quickly.
Yeah, but it shows you you're talking about habits, right? So people over 50 may not be as into, like, they go to the restaurant and they're like, QR code, like, I don't know what to do. My son's 29, he's like, it's 2 seconds, and he would want to pay his bill that way. It is indicative of how they are experiencing just every aspect of their lives, including text, including books. Other comments from readers? Gemma, you're sharp. I'm picking on you. She was a student in my Yale workshop, so I can pick on her.
Well, I've had a lot of thoughts swimming around, so I'm trying to articulate it. But I think it's interesting because, in a way, so this is a conversation I had with my roommates recently. They're saying they are actually reading more of it in the way of audiobooks because since they're so busy,
yes.
There's something about having the voice there and that kind of structure has been very comforting. If they're commuting, if they have a break in
They're listening to audio, did you say?
Listening to audio, because
yeah.
they still get the experience of the book, but they can kind of take that with them, and it seems like something that's a bit more resourceful. But then on the other hand, the opposite side of that, I have a friend who's read, I believe, roughly 300 books this year alone, and I don't know how she does it.
But there is something beautiful, right? Like you're holding it in your hand. It's like the return of vinyl. They've got such a big, huge return of vinyl records. They can't keep up with it. I saw that in the New York Times the other day. So I don't think it's going away, right? it's just how much of it is a distraction. I'm still getting used to, it was really neat to have the 3 readers, including Randall, and how am I experiencing, and there it was on my phone, and like, I was really having a great time, yes.
So, I mean, for myself, I still engage very much with text, but I'm a middle school librarian, and I will tell you that middle schoolers really gravitate to graphic novels. They're, you know, they're very visual, and that even if it's, I can sell a kid a book if it's got maybe a little doodle on the side, because maybe all they wanted to do was read Wimpy Kid or something else, but I'll say, oh, well, look at this, and then just gradually transition them. So I think just kids or people that are younger than us or younger generations are very visual because they live in a very visual world.
That is such, you're right in the middle of the culture that we're talking about. Like, they are the readers coming up. And I know even in my 20 to 25-year-olds in my feature writing class and things, their attention span is just not what it was 5 years ago. And I'm having to change how I teach, and I'm changing how I write. I've taught myself how to do watercolor painting. I'm not very good at it. But the process of actually doing it is making me think about 30 years of being a teacher of creative writing and where do our creative impulses come from, one of which I think is free play, which we're missing out on completely as children. And instead, they don't have the attention span that comes from sustained activity of anything, not just reading. There was a question right behind you, Tracy. Yeah.
So I just want to go off what I've said so far. Humans are pretty visual animals.
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter, for example, if you have a picture attached to your tweet, it's usually going to get you more engagement, more interactions.
Yes.
On Netflix, they probably spend the most amount of their money creating thumbnails. A lot of it is done by computer AI. It's just to take every single frame and use these different types of nodes and like how it's like they're taking like photography and all the stuff you can learn in photography class. They're turning into something that you can analyze. And it's really interesting. It's also different in every country. You might get a different the thumbnail that's playing the audio if you want to wait for a few seconds. There's playing music and birds.
No, thank you. I totally agree. One other thing I have to add, when the Harper Current came to interview my son and I when we did the At the Broken Places, a mother and trans son pick up the pieces, and they brought a video crew. And we had decided we didn't want to be on video because as a trans individual you have to worry about safety, and we thought it could be misused. So we haven't done any video or any TV for this publicity. The guy says, oh no, you don't understand. No one will read the article if we don't have a video. And I was like, people know my personality. That's just too bad. We're not having a video. And he said, no. The readership is 5 to 7 times more for even a modest video link within a text story, which totally gets at what you're saying. They spend more money on these little things. Tracy, another plant, this is a close friend of mine. Yeah.
Well, what strikes me when I hear this is first the sadness of how many voices have not been heard way back because they didn't have, access to being published, right? But on the other hand, now it seems like you see this transition of the art. It's like now it's like what is writing, and it's just like it's an intersection of art and music and sound and all this. It's actually pretty exciting.
It is. And Anthony, can we go back to you, because I know you are an inspirational speaker, and talk a little more about the audiences that you're working with and how do they respond to the fact that you are working in this medium. You mentioned it a little bit, but talk about it a little more.
Yeah. All right. So in the past 5 years working on the ambulance, I've probably met over 5,000 people. Now these are one-on-one encounters, right? So I'm with people from anywhere from 2 minutes to 2 hours and 30 minutes in the back of an ambulance in their most vulnerable moments, right? But before I finish my thought, I wanted to comment on just opportunity, right? So the pandemic forced us to shelter, forced us also to rethink, taking credit card transactions after, some time of not having taken credit card transactions. If I came out with this book maybe 2 years ago, I would have to then teach people how to use QR codes. It would have been less effective. But this was in many ways an opportune time because we were already learning together how to use QR codes. If I came out with this book maybe 3 years from now, it wouldn't be as inventive, as innovative as it would have been today. And so for me, the opportunity to use QR codes has presented itself because this is something we will all learn. It's refreshing, it's new, and it's exciting. So I look at just design, look at marketing, and using stressful situations to have to rethink things brings us into this next level of innovation and marketing and so forth. And that's what allowed this book to be what it is. Going back to your question, I forgot.
We're talking just about, because you've been doing so much guest speaking, and often maybe like middle school, high school kids also, right?
Okay.
And like, how are they responding? That's the age group that we were talking about, and that's the age group we need to nurture to be the readers that come to this festival. Later, 10 years when Jilton's still doing it. He shook his head. Right? I mean, I'm really interested to hear that.
Yeah.
How are they responding to what you're doing?
I've been more interested in learning how adults respond to it, less than the youth. Because when I speak at high schools, that's my way of reaching them. Like anything that I do, it's the same message. It's this message of unity, diversity. It's this message of impact. It's this message of being the best version of yourself. I'm just trying to make sure I can reach all people.
I see.
And so when I speak to high school students and middle school students, I can just go up there. I also have a magazine, so that's how I reach them. Culture Mag, shameless plug.
I took it up. It's Culture with a K.
Culture with a K, yeah. And my goal was more so to reach individuals like us, that are going to, these events. Because again, I'm with patients, and 80% of them are from the age of, like, say, 20 to 99. So how can I reach them? How can I impact them? And I wanted to bring the youthfulness and the innovation to a new audience and see how they would react. And it's refreshing. I think people gravitate towards it. I think people feel it. I think there's a lot of conviction in the messaging. There's a lot of conviction in when you listen to it. So it's less about it being different, but more about I feel this. And I think that's what people, no matter who you are, can connect with.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that's true for both of these authors. And again, after we're done here, you can go and get their books. The depth of their emotive engagement in their work keeps you in it, and you don't need anything more than that, I don't think, for having a good read. Let's open this up for Q&A a little bit. We got a couple more minutes here. Any questions for our panelists? Yes?
So I was always under the impression that trying to get all the ideas that you could possibly have for either a piece of fiction or something really personal or memoir, that it would shine really well as a film, getting both visual components, audio components, and all these different sorts of ways to interact with this medium. But that's art, you can't, often requires tons of money and tons of people as well, which is why I feel like mixed media is really going to start taking off because of you can have more control while also keeping it relatively low budget and also low cost of work.
Yeah.
The question would be, however, if you had the opportunity to just turn your concepts and ideas into a just massive film, would you take it, or would you think that would have lost something that you could get from?
Good question. Yes, go ahead.
I mean, if Netflix wants to come calling for the awards, I will not send them away.
That's great.
I don't think that's something that I would undertake on my own, just because that's not the medium that I work in and am familiar with and comfortable in. But if I was presented the opportunity and somebody else was going to pay for it, and they said, hey, do you want to translate this into a screenplay, I would go buy a book about how to write a screenplay and try to figure it out. And I have thought about that, because that, those subsidiary rights are often the best opportunities to actually make money as an author, and a lot of people are waiting for that offer. So I've thought about, what would this book look like as a film? And some things would be lost, but some other things would be gained. You know, I don't think it would be better or worse. It would just be very different. And the question of how you translate to that medium is an interesting one, and one that I don't have the answer to. But
Leaving the door open.
yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah,
I'll take it. Call me.
You want to comment on the question?
Sure. So to your question, I mean, I have a film now. I love to write scripts. You know, it'd be an honor to be able to work with a big production company. But in terms of on the car ride home, but when I had Instagram, so I don't have social media now, it got deleted, and I find that my life has been a lot less stressful without social media. So for those who have it, take those fasts from social media for a little bit. But on the car ride home, a lot of the promotional material that I did do, again, when it comes to marketing, you want to try to reach people where they are. You know, if they're engaging in 30-second, 15-second snippet videos, and then you can lead these breadcrumbs to this book or this song, then, so be it. You can try to do that. And so I would create, 30-second, 15-second, 2-minute videos. And so I circled it around the theme of being this radio host, and you're on the car ride home. And so I created a couple videos already, and those promotional videos is like me being this, hey, you now listening the sounds of, Audacity on the car ride home, da, 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 da. And it turned into this video, and I can see like it being this journey of a individual, of somebody who's going through something, dealing with Audacity, on the imposter syndrome, dealing with his story, dealing with struggles of motivation. Like, there's so much that could come from this, and it would be an honor to, but they ain't coming to Connecticut, so hey.
I have to answer the opposite, and almost none of my books would translate to film at all. I would have to say that in all honesty.
Or a documentary, though.
Yeah,
a documentary, because you
possibly, yeah, that's true. Possibly documentary, but not fictionalized film, or no. And I do think the other day, again, in one of my classes, I was having someone look at the magazine Wired. I don't know if anybody reads that. It's a really good tech magazine, comes out once a month. But they usually get most of their news from a place they don't know. It's something like, Facebook pop-up news or whatever. And so there was a story about Microsoft. The item on their social media was about a 1-minute clip, and the Wired article was 4,000 words long. And they had to read the whole thing and then write on it. And one of the things they commented on was, that clip I saw on my phone was like a waste of time. Like, I needed that whole article to understand the complexity of what's going on here. So I think that film can deal with complexities. It just happens the type of topics that I'm dealing with in my work wouldn't translate well to film. So then I get worried that increasingly are people going to expect visual and audio, and I'm a long-form writer. That's what I am, and which is ironic because I worked at National Geographic, and they could have cared less about the writers. Trust me, it was all about the photos. And I get it, but I never moved to the photo department. That wasn't what I do. So I just think it's going to be really interesting for people who are writing long-form novels. I mean, Jotham's novel. We'll give it a Spindle City. You guys should buy it. Pitching books here. It's a classic novel. Like, you have to sit down and read it and be patient and visit with it, and it's well crafted in the line level work. And it could be a movie. We'll send them to Jotham, but I also think it's unique as a novel. I'm not sure I would like the movie as much as the novel, so I think it depends. Any other questions? Do you have time maybe for one more? I think it's a riveting topic to close out our festival. I know everyone's tired. It's the end of the day. It's an entire festival of readers about writing, celebrating literary life, and we are undergoing fundamental changes on how we take in story, read story, and handle text. Yeah, Jotham. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I also know about limitations. And I think sometimes it's hard to limit that to yourself.
Yep.
And I know I can do average work visually. It's not my skill. And I'm more excited to operate in your sense of the film. I love film collaboration. And I love saying to these designers, here's the idea, we'll make it really sexy. And then you do this. And then there's the fun project that see it out. Because I don't want you to do your after work, and anyone can accomplish it.
Yes.
But to have that collaboration. The thoughtfulness of the education.
Yes.
I just don't think of that way.
collaboration. I mean, maybe the answer to this panel discussion is instead of putting all this pressure on yourself to be the person who understands the audio, the video, even though in school we're training everyone in all those areas. In fact, the answer might be, Lily's father was a professional artist, so she's using his art. She's not creating art. Her art is in the text. And then if somebody wants the film rights, a different artist would do it. That is how the industry's generally been. But I tell you, the mixing of media is totally happening on the page. It's totally fascinating. We really appreciate you listening today, and I really want to thank both of our authors for coming. It's been really neat looking at their work, and it's on sale afterwards outside. Let's get these authors some book sales.